Good evening once again, and welcome to A Course in Miracles, text chapter 26, the transition. This is the movement from sleeping to awakening. And we move on to 26.4, where sin has left. Again, remember, this is now addressing the decision maker, the true. So you're moving closer to the self, and you're now needing to make a decision between staying asleep, wrong-mindedness, being caught in the world of action, doing, feeling, sensations, thoughts, ideas, belief, and moving into right-mindedness, silent stillness, abiding in gratitude, where the self, which is silent stillness, reveals itself to itself. So you, the little I, the little me, separate self, is searching for happiness. The very essence of happiness is the essence of that which is the self, the silent self, which is the Christ mind, which is the Son of God, which is God's love, the extension of God. And it's now addressing us, trying to explain the dynamics of the dreaming mind, the dynamics of the attacking dreaming mind, and the alternative, the only alternative you have while you embody mind, which is returning to the new world, seeing the world anew, seeing through the eyes of Christ. In other words, knowing, being thyself knowingly. Forgiveness in this world is equivalent of heaven's justice. What is heaven's justice? Equality amongst all. The fact that every sun is identical to every other sun. Each sun being that which is the extension of God's love. And so forgiveness, it translates the world of sin, this world of separation, duality, into a simple world, a new world, a new way of seeing it. Of course, the physical world doesn't really change because your physicality doesn't change. Your perception of self diminishes to right-minded perception, still perception, but now right-mindedness. You're seeing it very simply. And awareness starts becoming all-pervading in your awareness. So mind, self, becomes filled with awareness, the continuous stream of awareness that when into wrong mind, that awareness pours out as the appearance of a continuous stream of thoughts that seem to be linked but are not. They try and link themselves like a chain. They try and one thought leads to the next, leads to the next, leads to the next. Meanwhile, if you move into silent stillness, where thought dissolves and only awareness remains, or a singularity of thought, meaning simple, pure awareness, where justice can be reflected from beyond the gate behind, which total lack of limits lie. So this is the gate. This is now moving into bridge consciousness, awakening awareness. Nothing in boundless love, God's love, could need forgiveness. Nothing in heaven, boundless love, could need forgiveness. And what is charity within the world gives way to simple justice. Because charity is really the pouring out of ourselves passionately in service of one another. And so it gives way to simple justice past the gate that opens into heaven. So simple justice, the new world is seen anew as a just world where everyone is given everything, and having and being are the same. No one forgives unless he has believed in sin. So when you forgive the world or you forgive yourself, it's because you believed you've done something wrong, or you believe the world's done you wrong. And you still believe that he has much to be forgiven. So those of you that believe that you need to still practice forgiveness, it's because you believe you've done something wrong, and therefore you need to forgive it, whether you're seeing it in others or yourself. Believe you've done something wrong, or the world's done something wrong to you. Or if you get that understanding that everything is giving and receiving are one and the same, and you realize you've created it, and the world attacks you as a representation of the sin you've created, reflections of self. Mirrors, the worlds are mirrors. And yet when you try and grab a mirror, what do you the object in the mirror. What do you grab when you grab an object in the mirror? You grab the mirror itself. You grab that which is the essence of self, because all of it is you. You can't grab an object in the mirror. Forgiveness thus becomes the means by which we learn that he has done nothing to forgive. So forgiveness eventually gets you to the place where you realize there's nothing to forgive. Forgiveness always rests upon the one who offers it until he sees himself as needing it no more. So once all your forgiveness is realized, you'll realize there's nothing to forgive because it was all you. And you were only but forgiving yourself for dreaming up a dream that could never happen. And thus as he returned to his real function of creating. Because while you sleep, you believe in sin, and therefore you've stopped creating, you started making as soon as you fell asleep. And when you return to self, what does the self do? Continuously extends. And what is extension? Creation. Okay. And thus he has returned to his real function of creating, which his forgiveness offers him again. Forgiveness turns the world of sin into a world of glory. And that's why in many religions, they hate the idea. I mean, that's the one thing that the world has a problem with. Religious groups, well, specifically mostly only the Christians in their variety of forms, have a real problem with the Course in Miracles, because the Course in Miracles doesn't believe in sin. It believes in error that can be corrected. And let's say there was sin. Could God not even forgive sin? Of course he could. God could do anything he wanted to do. So if you had sinned and you asked God to forgive you, wouldn't he forgive your sin? Of course. So God can forgive anything. You see, in these religions that are so hell-bent, excuse the pun, hell-bent on needing to punish, they hate the idea that there's a group going around saying there's no sin, because they've had to sacrifice so much because of sin. And now this group comes along and says, there's no sin. The Son of God is free. I am. And they hate the idea because they hold themselves in bondage to sin and their little guilty thoughts and guilty pleasures and perverse thoughts, because they all have them. Every single one of them has them. Why? Because they denounce themselves. And what you denounce, you resist. And what you resist persists. So spiritual people are bombarded with attack thoughts of their perversions. Why? They're in resistance to. And now there's this group that's completely free, and they hate the idea, And so if you read this line to people that are so trapped in dogma, they just get so angry. They can't attack it, though, because it makes sense. Forgiveness turns the world of sin into the world of glory, God's glory. Wonderful. What? Because there's nothing to forgive. So it starts to represent heaven. And the representation of heaven in the dream world is what we call the real world, or what the Course calls the real world. So it's wonderful to see. Each flower shines in light. It's each flower, each heart shines in light. And every bird sings the joy of heaven. What is every bird that sings? Every voice rejoices that there is no sun, that there's no sin. The Son of God is free. Each flower, each self, each soul, each bird, each voice of that which is, sings the joy of heaven, sings the praise to God in the recognition we've never left. There is no sadness, and there is no parting here, for everything is totally forgiven. Totally forgiven. Because God forgives not. God has nothing to forgive. God realizes his Son is asleep, dreaming a dream that never happened, dreaming a dream which is a nightmare to him, where he's either victim or victor, where someone's either hurt or someone's being hurt. And so who's going to forgive the activities of someone's dreaming mind when none of it is real? That person who dreamt it up, the Son of God, who dreamt up this universe, a world of vengeance, sin, fear, guilt, he needs to forgive himself. His Father has nothing to forgive him for. He's simply dreaming a dream that never happened in God's reality. What sin is there? In other words, to make sin real, you have to make the world real and bodies real, and you have to insist that God created bodies and somehow planted a soul in each body. That whole thing is a fairy tale story. No one's ever been able to prove it. And then because they can't prove it, they move straight into it. But you have to have faith And I love to quote that line in the Bible where they say, Jesus said, blessed are thee who believe and haven't seen. Oh, they love to quote that. And Jesus wasn't talking about having faith in illusions. Jesus was talking about having faith in the self, in the Christ self, that which he represented while he walked this earth. Why did he represent it? Because he had nothing to forgive. And because he had nothing to forgive, his mind was awake. He saw right-mindedness. He saw the new world. And therefore he looked upon everyone as perfectly healed. And when he looked upon everyone perfectly healed, he offered them that understanding. And that's where healing miracles took place. Because you, that which is awake, talks to one of your dreaming characters and says, you but dream, so let me show you another way to dream. Let me show you a healed way to dream. And what has been forgiven must join. Because what are we? We're one dreaming mind that is fractured and believed in separation. And what's kept separation? Fear, sin, guilt. But the minute you get rid of that which keeps us separated, the idea of sin, fear, guilt, the self reunites, becomes one mind, one Christ, one Holy Son of God. So what has been forgiven must join. For nothing stands between to keep them separate and apart, to keep the one self fractured. It returns the one self to itself. The sinless must perceive that they are one, for nothing stands between to push the other off. And in the space that sin left vacant, do they see join as one, in glad recognition that what is part of them has not been kept apart and separate. It just appeared to be so in a dream that never existed. The holy place on which you stand, so no matter where you are, is but the space that sin has left. In other words, in your awareness of what you appear to be as a body mind, in actual fact, you're simply pure mind, pure self. There is no more idea of sin because you've realized it's simply but a dream. And surely you recognize this by now. By chapter 26, surely by now you recognize you are the Son of God, eternally free, unchanged, forever in God's mind. Simply dreamt a dream that wasn't true. And here you see the face of Christ. Now again, I strongly remind you, we're not talking Jesus. Jesus demonstrated Christ-mindedness. Christ meaning awake, anointed awake, self-recognized, self-realized, fully awake. And here you see the face of awakening. You see, you realize the truth. Christ is truth known, infused with the memory of God, God's Holy Spirit. Christ and the Holy Spirit are one, arising in its place. So you see everything joined in your mind. Who could behold the face of Christ symbolically and not recall his Father as he really is? So to remember God, you must first know yourself as Christ, the mind awake. And the mind awake can recall our Creator, God, our source. Who could fear love and stand upon the ground where sin has left a place for heaven's altar? Heaven's altar, our heart to rise in awakening and tower far above the dream of the world and reach beyond the dream of the universe to touch the heart, the source, the Christ, the Son of God of all creation, the Son of God that created this universe in its dream, dreamt it up, made it up in its dream. What is heaven? What is the essence of God? But a song of gratitude and love and praise by everything created to the source of its creation. It's a recognition. Heaven is but a recognition, a song of gratitude, the recognition of our true self, our shared being with God. The holiest of altars is set where one sin was believed to be in our body, in our illusionary, space-time, people, places, things, and events, activity. And so where is the altar now? The heart. What is the heart? The awake mind. You don't have mind and heart. Mind, body, soul. These are illusionary constructs by a mind that has no idea what it's speaking of. There's not body, mind, soul. There's simply self, soul, spirit. Spirit and soul is the same in this course. And body, mind is illusion. And so what is heart? Heart is mind awake, mind of the dreamer awake. What we call mind, we point to our head, is the wrong mind. Right mind is the heart, filtering through, and all our thoughts are suspended and then become inspired, where we act through our passionate natural talents. And here does every light of heaven come to the heart, to the altar, to the temple, the tabernacle, where God abides. Where the memory of God abides. It reminds us that we are his son, to be rekindled, Father and Son joy, and increasing joy. For here is what was lost, returned to them. Who's these them they're talking about? All those that awoke and now reside as the Christ mind, the dreamer, the fractures that are awakening since Jesus resurrected and ascended and became the first to join the office of the Christ mind, the awake mind. Every subsequent being that has awoken to self, the self has awoken, now resides as lights in lit lights. The mind is lit with every fracture that has returned, and the mind is just becoming, the lit mind is becoming wider and wider until it will envelop all the fractured characters in one singular, one dreaming Son of God. And all their radiance made whole again, because the radiance is fractured and will only be whole when every fracture returns to the mind awake. I don't think of it as bodies, because it's impossible to imagine all these bodies becoming enlightened. It's the essence inside all of them. It's the spirit inside everyone, which is the truth. Body, minds, the identities, the thoughts are all unreal. Forgiveness brings no little miracles to lay before the gates of heaven. Here the Son of God comes to receive each gift that brings him nearer to his home, to the recognition he's never left. No one is lost, cannot be, and none is cherished more than the other, because they're all equal in the view of, in the eyes of God. Eyes. God doesn't have eyes, in the knowing, in the mind of God. Each reminds him of his Father's love as surely as the rest. Each awakened fractured self contains the essence of the self, the Son, and that of God. So each one is a reminder. We become reminders to one another of God's infinite eternal love in the here and now. And each one teaches him that what he fears, he loves the most. Because what do we fear the most? Our brother. What do we love the most? Our brother. Why? Because our brother is one with ourselves. What but a miracle could change his mind? The recognition of self is the miracle. The greatest miracle is the realization. I am that. I am. I am the Son that fell asleep and dreamt the dream that could never be, so that he understands that love cannot be feared. What but a miracle could do this? What other miracle is there but this? We want to make a myriad of miracles and ideas that get to transcend. It's just awaken to self. Be thyself knowingly. Be thyself silently and in total gratitude, and you shall know that which you are. And what else need there be to make the space between you disappear, you and your brother? Where sin was once perceived, the world of bodies and dreams, will rise a world that will become an altar to the truth. And you will join the lights of heaven there. All those fractured beings that have returned to the Christ mind and all the sonship of God are joined in oneness, the lights in heaven. Remember, every sun is a light cell. And so what is heaven? A continuous stream of light cells, the sonship continually extending, and sing, and this is obviously symbolic, and sing their song of gratitude and prayer, because it's just energy extending forever as the light and the love of God. And as they come to you to be complete, to join, become complete when all fractures join as one, so will you go with them. For there's only one of you, one of us. For no one hears the song of heaven, the truth, the memory of heaven, and remains without a voice that adds its power to the song of gratitude and makes it sweeter still. With every fracture, with every body mind, with every human being that awakens to self, the Christ mind lights that much more, that much more, that much more, until every fracture joins in one massive light. And that light returns knowingly as that which is the lights of heaven, the lights of God. And each one joins the singing at the altar that was raised. The awareness was raised. The heart is raised into awareness within the tiny spot that sin proclaimed to be its own. Tiny spot, this body mind. So the altar is raised beyond this body mind, and that now knows itself knowingly as that which is that I am, that which is pure conscious awareness, awareness of being awareness itself. And what was tiny, the tiny body mind, that then has soared into magnitude of song, the praise to its creator, of which it's one with, in which the universe is joined. So the fractures all join, has joined, but with a single voice, one Holy Son of God. This tiny spot of sin that stands between you and your brothers still is holding back the happy opening of heaven's gate. Your heart opens. So as long as you believe you're separate as this body and not the recognition of yourself and your brother's self as one shared self and one shared being in God, as long as you hold that idea, you hold the idea of sin true. So as long as you think that this thing needs to be corrected, that this thing can be fixed, that this thing needs to be forgiven, this body mind, that this thing has a drama and an issue. If you think this is a problem, you can't correct it because you're going to try and fix this. The only way you fix this is you forget this and you remember the only thing that is true about this appearance, the essence of itself, its spirit, its heart, its mind joined with the mind of Christ. The mind of Christ joined with the mind of God, because the mind of Christ is the thought in the mind of God. The mind of Christ, the Son, is a thought in God's mind. And so you're a fractured thought in the Christ's mind. At first asleep, dreaming. Now that the Christ is awoken, you awaken too and join with the Christ mind, the awake mind, the anointed mind. How little is the hindrance that withholds the wealth of heaven from you. It's tiny. It's a tiny little hindrance, because you can transcend it in knowing and in awareness. And how great will the joy in heaven in the mind be, in the mind of Christ be, when you join the mighty chorus to the love of God, because that's all there is. The extension of God, the extension, the sonship, is the chorus of love eternally extending in the eternal now. You are that which is recalling and remembering that which you are. We are returning to the mind that dreamt us up, the mind which awoke when Jesus awoke, joined with Holy Spirit, remembered himself, remembered his Father, became that part of the mind fully awake. The body mind of Jesus dissolved. The essence of Jesus is now Christ, which is the self-same essence as every other fracture. And so it took one fracture to awaken to self, and now all fractures know how. And every time each one of us awakens, the dream of illusion dissolves, and we return awake, anointed, lit to the lit mind. And the minute you join with the lit mind, you remember you're now at bridge consciousness. Why can't you go straight back into God? Because you're not a fracture anymore. You're now joined with the singularity. And when all fractures join, only that one completely joined mind returns, well, it's never left, returns knowingly, realizes it's never left God's mind, returns knowingly, consciously to God. I'll stop there and we'll do some questions.